Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for justice, for they shall be satisfied. To the Hebrew mind, to understand what that word means, justice, there is no distinction, there is no different word for justice and holiness. They're the same thing. The just man is the holy man, is the saint. What does it essentially connote, again, in the Hebrew sense? Well, it is the person who orders his or her life to the will of God. That the will of God is being accomplished in and through and by me. That my life is ordered, my world is ordered towards the fulfillment of that. To show, again, the Psalms talk about in our fidelity to God, we manifest God's justice to the nations. What that means is, well, God made the world. God is king of the world. God owns the world. It is God's world. And so to live in right relationship with God, you live in the knowledge of that. You share dominion. Now, in the peace and justice movement, interestingly enough, dominion is not a word that they like very much. Which is the Genesis thing. God says to Adam and Eve, go and have dominion over the world, because in English we would translate that as dominate. Go dominate the world. Okay, well, let's do a little Latin, shall we? The word for the word dominus in Latin is Lord. Lord is the Hebraization of the name of God. What the word have dominion literally, etymologically would mean is go be as the Lord to the world. So yes, govern. Yes, eat the fruit, the product of the world. But do it as the Lord would have you do it. And He is the creator, not the exploiter of the created order. So your true dominion is acting as God towards the world, which is an entirely a positive thing. That so of course you would take the bounty of the harvest and of the animals and whatever, but you would do it in such a way that that these things continue. That's what the Hebrew mind means in terms of ordering your life vis-a-vis the world, and therefore reflecting something of God's lordship in the created world. The problem, therefore, of sin is that the human person, man, is free. You are free to live this way or not. You are free to live in consonance or in disconsonance with the will of God. So, in other words, biblical holiness of the Old Testament is not mythical powers. Biblical holiness is not some sort of enlightened senses. You will find no examples. And no, that's not true. Every example you will find in the Old Testament of someone going out and searching out the guru, the mystical figure, the witch of Endor, is a bad thing in the Bible. Because that's not what holiness is. That's not what of God is. It's simply the acknowledgement of the objective truth of God and living it. Living as if God is true because He is. There's holiness. The Greeks take this up a little bit and develop it, and this is where in the New Testament, justice implies a sense of right direction, the correct relationship with the world and others because you have a right relationship with God. The word justice in Greek is righteousness, dikaiosune. You are made righteous in God. Christ, who is the righteous one, makes you righteous with the Father. You cannot do it yourself. Righteousness, justice, is not something that you can arrive at by your own action. because humanity has sinned. It is God, through the action of his Son, who makes you righteous, because you weren't. But once you are, well then, it's on you to reflect that right relationship with God now in the way that you live with other people. And so we can talk about our hearts therefore desire righteousness. Our hearts desire justice naturally, because it is natural in a redeemed sense, natural to desire what God desires. Because ultimately that's the consonance of creation. See, that's where it brings together that Old Testament version, the consonance of creation. The natural desire of your heart should not be to destroy, should not be to oppress, because that's not to be found in God. And there's always a tension between our present desire, the hunger and thirst for righteousness, translating this in the language of the Bible, present desire, with its future fulfillment. Because, we're just 20 people. The world out there is all sorts of screwed up, and there's a lot more of them. So, how do we influence, global justice, national, even state, when we're just, if you will, a small community? Israel was always a small community in the midst of the world. To be just and to, again, the New Testament understanding is simply to be just, to be righteous, is simply to be forever dissatisfied with everything and anything that is not God. And we all know, because we all have sinned, that there are plenty of things that substitute for God. And some of them feel quite nice. Some of them, are pleasures, that captivate the mind and the heart. But if they are less than God, if they are less than, if you will, the desires of the divine heart, they will ultimately leave us empty. Yesterday was the feast of St. Ignatius of Loyola. This is St. Ignatius's great conversion, experience. Like me, he blew up his leg. Unlike me, he didn't have good surgeons. So there he lay for a year or so, and trying to recover from this thing. He was a knight. He was, therefore, everything that went with that. He drank hard. He played hard. He went through, an entire stable of women, and his whole life was, these kinds of pleasures. So you're lying there with your leg in the air, and what do? It is, and I can attest to this, incredibly boring. When all you can do is move from your couch to the bed for like months on end. So you think thoughts, you have daydreams, you enact your fantasies, And for him, it was great victories and battles and brawls and drink and ladies and everything else. And eventually that gets boring too. And so he wanted something to read, and as the story goes, the only two books available in the house where he was recovering were the Bible and the Lives of the Saints. And for months he didn't touch either of them, because really, why would you? So thought he. So he starts reading the Lives of the Saints, and it's not like he stopped having these other thoughts and fantasies as well, So, but what he begins to notice is how he felt after. That once, if he engaged in some marvelous fantasy, about some amorous conquest, that felt really nice during. But after, he just felt empty, alone. Because then, of course, the sun is going down, and he realized just how alone he actually was. Where when he would read and think about the lives of the saints and trying to know, what if I could do something like that? Well, how would I have reacted in that heroic situation? He found a certain heroism in the lives of the saints that appealed to his chivalric, sense. But he found that feeling stayed with him. That there was fulfillment, that it actually led somewhere of not feeling horrible about himself and hating himself, but actually, okay, this is good. And over time, he developed that into the language of consolation and desolation. And so therefore the need to discern the spirits. That our hearts are going to be moved by ephemeral things, passing things, and by divine things, true things. Most people, says Ignatius, don't know how to get to the difference between the two. Our hearts are just kind of picked up by the wind and blown in whatever direction. And then all of a sudden we're sitting there feeling like crap, and we're not sure why we're miserable. And again, a lot of people are miserable. Because if your hearts are set on the things that are not just, are not the desires of God, ultimately it's going to leave you empty. And once you know that about yourself, you don't want to be empty anymore. And once you know that about yourself, you don't really want other people to be empty too. And so the just person no longer can countenance injustice, any form of injustice. You don't want to see it happening to someone else, just as much as you wouldn't want to see it happening to your own kids or your own wife or spouse or whatever. No. You realize that it's not enough for you to construct your life based on the will of God so you'll feel, this way, but that in fact the world, society, should be based on this, because that's the only way we arrive at right relationships with each other. You get it right with God, and then you get it right with everyone else. You don't get it right with everyone else first. It's impossible if you've excluded God. Why communism doesn't work. And there is an impatience about this. The more that God's, and His virtues and His desires captivate your own heart, well, yeah, then you actually do start looking at the world with the impatience of God. Again, if the Sacred Heart reveals God's burning desire for our happiness, let's put this one in big quotes. What must God feel looking out on the world with so much brokenness and so much unhappiness? We're all His children. Parents, you understand the convulsions of your own hearts when your kids screw up. You have to let them sometimes, make those mistakes, but there's nothing harder than a parent to let the kid make the mistake and be there to pick up the pieces. Your natural inclination is to step in, is to protect. Well, this is exactly it. So for the Christian, justice, authentic justice, is not a private affair. It can't be. It can't be, because you seek the realization of God's justice, God's holiness in every stratum of society, so that in every element of creation brought into being by God's loving will acknowledge that, and in acknowledging that find true happiness. Therefore, justice and holiness, righteousness, the one who thirsts for that, desires the bringing about of the kingdom. It's taking the petition of the Our Father and making it your own. Thy kingdom come. And that is not, just a non-governmental organization. That is not doing good for the sake of doing good. That's doing good for the glory of God. And the glory of God is man fully alive, man who fully realizes himself and his ultimate destiny and therefore his ultimate happiness. The ultimate truth, the thing that lasts, is the relationship with God, the kingdom. Everything else that distracts here and now, all of these other pleasures, pass away. Pass away. The great motivating factors of human societies, sex, money, power, none of them exist in heaven. There's the point. It all passes away. What are you left with? The hunger and the thirst for justice. And if the kingdom of God is the one thing that lasts, if the being in relationship with the Father is the one thing that lasts, then yeah, you will be satisfied. because that's what's left. What's left is what was begun in you at your baptism, the coming into being of this relationship with the Father. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for justice, they will be satisfied.